Thank you. So this is the talk. This is the book. So it has my first ever clickbait title. And I like the cover. I like the cover because for two reasons. One, there's only one button that says OK, when it's clearly not OK. And it looks like this thing's been throwing error messages for the past hour, and nobody has been paying any attention to them. So this is a book as a computer. And what I'm writing about is security in a world where everything is a computer. And I think this is the way we need to conceptualize the world we're building. This phone is not a phone. It's a computer that makes phone calls. And similarly, your microwave oven is a computer that makes things hot. And your refrigerator is a computer that keeps things cold. An ATM machine is a computer with money inside. And in a car is now a computer with 4 wheels and an engine. Actually, that's wrong. A car is about a 100-plus distributed system with 4 wheels and an engine. Right? And so this is more than the internet. It's the Internet of Things, but it's more than that as well. In my book, I use the term Internet Plus. I hate having to invent a term, but there really isn't a term we have for the internet, the computers, the things, the big systems like power plants, the data stores, the processes, the people. And it's that holistic system that I think we need to look at when we look at security. So if everything is becoming a computer, it means two things that are relevant here. That internet security becomes everything security, and all the lessons and problems of internets and computers become problems everywhere. So let me start with 6 sort of quick lessons of computer security, which will be true about everything and everywhere. Some of them are obvious in computers, not so obvious elsewhere. All right, the first, most software is poorly written and insecure. Right? We know this. Basic reason is the market doesn't want to pay for quality software. Right? Good, fast, cheap, pick any two. We have picked fast and cheap over good. Right? With very expensive exceptions like avionics and the space shuttle, most software is really lousy. It kind of just barely works. Now for security, right, lots of vulnerabilities. Lots of bugs. Some of those bugs are vulnerabilities. Some of those vulnerabilities are exploitable, which means modern software has lots of exploitable vulnerabilities. And that's not going to change anytime soon. The second lesson is that the internet was never designed with security in mind. That seems ridiculous today. But if you think back to the late 70s and early 80s, there were 2 things that were true. One, the internet was used for nothing important ever. And 2, you had to be a member of a research institution to have access to it. And you read the early designers, and they talked about how limiting physical access was a security measure. And the fact you could exclude bad actors meant that you didn't have to worry much about security. So a decision was made deliberately to leave security to the endpoints, not put in the network. Right, fast forward today, and we are still living with the results of that. In the domain name system and routing and packet security, email addresses, sort of again and again. The protocols don't have security, and we are stuck with them. Third lesson. The extensibility of computerized systems means they can be used against us. Extensibility is not something that non-computer people are used to. Basically, what I mean by that is you can't constrain the functionality of a computer because it's software. When I was a kid, I had a telephone, big black thing attached to the wall, great device, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make it be anything other than a telephone. This is a computer that makes phone calls. It can do anything you want, right? There's an app for that. Because this can be programmed, because it's a computer, it can do anything. You can't constrain its functionality. Right? It means several things for security. Hard to test this thing, because what it does changes, how it's configured changes. And it can get additional features you don't want. That's what malware is. So you can put malware on this phone or on an interconnected refrigerator in a way that you can't possibly ever do it in an old electrical mechanical refrigerator, because they're not computers. Fourth lesson is about complexity. In a lot of ways I can say this. Basically, the complexity of computers means attack is easier than defense. I could spend an hour on that sentence. But complex systems are hard to secure. Internet's the most complex machine mankind has ever built, by a lot, which makes this incredibly hard to secure. Hard to design securely, hard to test, sort of everything about it. It is easier to attack a system than to defend it. A fifth lesson is that there are new vulnerabilities in the interconnections. As we connect things to each other, vulnerabilities in one thing affect other things. With lots of examples, the Dyn botnet, vulnerabilities in internet-connected was digital video recorders and webcams primarily, allowed an attacker to create a botnet that dropped a domain name server that in turn dropped a couple dozen real popular websites. A 2013 Target Corporation attacked through a vulnerability in the HVAC contractor of several of their mid-Pennsylvania stores. Earlier this year, there's a story of a casino in Las Vegas. We don't know the name of the casino. They had their high roller database stolen, and the hackers got in through, and I'm not making this up, their internet-connected fish tank. So, right, vulnerabilities, this can be hard because sometimes nobody's at fault. I blogged a few months ago about a vulnerability that results from the way Google treats email addresses, right? The dots don't matter for your name, and the way Netflix treats email addresses, the dots do matter. Turns out you can play some games with that. Who do we blame? I'm not sure we blame anybody. There's a vulnerability in PGP, which is actually not really a vulnerability in PGP. It's a vulnerability in the way emailers handle PGP, which everyone is convinced everyone else is at fault. And these kind of things are going to happen more and more. The last lesson is that attacks always get better. Attacks always get easier, faster, cheaper. Right? Some of this is Moore's law. Computers get faster. So password guessing gets faster as computers get faster, not because we're smarter about it, but we also get smarter. Attackers adapt, attackers figure out new things, and expertise flows downhill. What today is a top secret NSA program, tomorrow becomes a PhD thesis, and the next day is a common hacker tool. And you can see this again and again. An example might be IMSI catchers, fake cell phone towers, stingrays. Right, which the cause of them is that cell phones don't authenticate to tower. They automatically trust anybody who says, I'm a tower. So if you put up a fake tower, you can now query phones and get their addresses that sort of know who's there. Now this was something that the NSA used, the FBI used, big government secret for a while. Expertise flowed downhill a few years ago. I think it was Motherboard. Looked around the DC, found a couple of dozen of them run by we don't know who around US government buildings. I mean, right now you can go on Alibaba.com, buy one of those things for about $1,000. In China, they're used to send spam to phones. You get a software-defined radio card. You can download free software and make your own. Right? What started out as something that was hard to do is now easy to do. So those are my sort of 6 lessons that are going to be true for everything. And none of that is new, but up to now it's been basically a manageable problem. But I think that's going to change. And the reasons are automation, autonomy, and physical agency. Computers that can do things. So if you do computer security, you've heard of the CIA triad. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. 3 basic properties we deal with in security. By and large, most of what our issues are confidentiality. Someone stole and misused our data. That's Equifax. That's Office of Personnel Management. That's Cambridge Analytica. That's all of the data thefts ever. But when you have computers that can affect the world in a direct physical manner, integrity and availability become much more serious. Because the computers can do stuff. There's real risk to life and property. So yes, I'm concerned that someone hacks my hospital and steals my private patient medical records. But I'm much more concerned that they change my blood type. I don't want them to hack my car and use the Bluetooth microphone to listen in on conversations. But I really don't want them to disable the brakes. Right? Those are data integrity and data availability attacks, respectively. So suddenly, the effects are much greater. And this is cars, medical devices, drones, any kind of weapon systems, thermostats, power plants, smart city anything, appliances. I blogged a couple of days ago about an attack where someone, just theoretical, if you can hack enough major appliances, can turn power on and off in synchronization and affect the load on power plants and potentially cause blackouts. Now, very much a side effect, but once I say that, you say, well, yeah, duh, of course you can do that. Very different sort of attack. Right? There's a fundamental difference between my spreadsheet crashes and I lose my data and my implanted defibrillator crashes and I lose my life. And it could be the same CPU, the same operating system, the same vulnerability, the same attack software. Because of what the computer can do, the effects are much different. So at the same time we're getting this increased functionality, there's some long-standing security paradigms that are failing. And I'll give three. The first one is patching. Right? Patching is how we get security. And it's now having trouble. Actually, there's two reasons why our phones and computers are secure as they are. The first is that there are security engineers at Apple, at Microsoft, at Google that are designing them as secure as they are in the first place. And those engineers can quickly write and push down patches when vulnerabilities are discovered. That's a pretty good ecosystem. We do that well. The problem is it doesn't work for low-cost embedded systems like DVRs and routers. These are designed and built offshore by third parties, by ad hoc teams that come together, design them, and then split apart. I mean, there aren't people who can write those patches when a vulnerability is discovered. And even worse, a lot of these devices have no way to patch them. Right? If your DVR is vulnerable to the hack that allows it to be recruited to a botnet, the only way you can patch it is to throw it away and buy a new one. That's the mechanism. We have no other. Now, actually throw it away and buy a new one is a reasonable security measure. We do get security from the fact that the life cycle of phones and computers is, 3 to 5 years? That's not true for consumer goods. You're going to replace your DVR every 10 years, your refrigerator every 25 years. I bought a programmable thermostat last year. I expect to replace it approximately never. Think about it in terms of a car. Right, you buy a car today. So let's say software is 2 years old. You're going to drive it for 10 years, sell it. Someone else buys it, drives it for 10 years. They sell it. Someone else buys it, puts it on a boat, sends it to South America. Whereas someone else there buys it, drives it for another 10 to 20 years. And you go home, find a computer from 1976. Try to boot it, try to run it, try to make it secure. We actually have no idea how to secure 40-year-old consumer software. We have the faintest clue. And we need to figure it out. So what? Does Chrysler maintain a test bed of 200 chassis for vulnerability testing and for patch testing? Is that the mechanism? I mean, we're not going to be able to treat these goods like we treat phones and computers. We start forcing the computer life cycle onto all these other things, we are probably literally going to cook the planet. So we need some other way, and we don't have it. Second thing that's failing is authentication. Right? We've always been only OK at authentication. But authentication is going to change. Right now, authentication tends to be me authenticating to some object or service. What we're going to see an explosion in is thing-to-thing authentication, where objects need to authenticate to objects. And there's going to be a lot of it. Imagine a driverless car or even some kind of computer-assisted driving car. It'll want to authenticate to thousands of other cars, road signs, emergency vehicles and signals, lots of things. And we don't know how to do that at scale. Or you might have 100 IoT objects in your orbit to authenticate to each other. That's 10,000 authentications. Right? 1,000 objects, 1,000,000 authentications. I mean, right now, this tends to be our IoT hub. If you have an IoT anything, you likely control it via your phone. I'm not sure that scales to that many things. And while we can do thing-to-thing authentication, it's very much deliberate. So right now, when I get into my car, this phone authenticates to the car automatically. Right? That works. Bluetooth works. But it works because I was there to set it up. And I'll do that for 10 things, for 20 things. I'm not doing it for 1,000. I'm not doing it for 1,000,000. So we need some way to do this automatic thing-to-thing authentication at scale, and we don't have it. The third thing that's failing is supply chain. Supply chain security is actually insurmountably hard. Now, we've seen the papers in the past year. It's been one of two stories. It's Kaspersky, right? Should we trust a Russian-made antivirus program? And Huawei and ZTE. Should we trust Chinese-made phone equipment? But that really is just the tip of the iceberg. There are other stories, not just the US. Turns out in 2014, China banned Kaspersky. They also banned Symantec, by the way. 2017, I have a story from India identifying 45 Chinese phone apps that they say shouldn't be used. In 1997, I don't know if people remember, there was worries in the US about Checkpoint, an Israeli-made security product. Should we trust it? And also, I like to remember a 2008 program called Mujahideen Secrets, which was an ISIS-created encryption program because, of course, you can't trust Western encryption programs. But the country of origin of the product is just the tip of the iceberg. Where are the chips made? Where is the software written? Where is the device fabbed? Where the programmers are from? Right? I mean, this iPhone probably has, what, a couple of 100 different passports that are programming this thing? It's not made in the US. And every part of the chain is a vulnerability. There are papers showing how you can take a good chip design, the masks, and maliciously put in another layer and compromise the security of the chip without the designers knowing it. And it doesn't show up in testing. There was another paper about 2 years ago. You can hack an iPhone through a malicious replacement screen. Right? You have to trust every piece of the system. The distribution mechanisms. We've seen backdoors in Cisco equipment. Remember the NSA intercepted Cisco's routers being sent to the Syrian telephone company? That was one of the great pictures from the Snowden documents. We've seen fake apps in the Google Play Store. We know that Russia attacked Ukraine through a software update mechanism. I think my favorite story, this is a hard one, 2003, there was actually a very clever, very subtle backdoor that almost made it into Linux. We caught it, and we kind of just barely caught it. We got very lucky. And you look at the code, it really is hard. You have to look for it to see the back door. Now, that could have easily gotten in. We don't know what else has gotten in what. And solving this is hard. No one wants a US-only iPhone. It's probably A, impossible, and B, it'll cost 10x. Our industry is at every level international. It is deeply international. From the programmers to the objects, to the cloud, the services. We will not be able to solve this easily. So, in a lot of ways, this is a perfect storm. Things are failing just as everything is becoming interconnected. And I think we've been okay with a unregulated tech space because it fundamentally didn't matter. And that's changing. And I think this is primarily a policy problem. And in my book, I spend most of the time on policy. And I talk about a lot of different policy levers we have to improve this. Talk about standards, regulations, liabilities, courts, international treaties. I think it's a very hard political battle, and I don't think we're going to have in the US until a catastrophic event. I look more to Europe to lead. Now, I could go through all of this, but I want to give sort of two principles I want to pull out. The first is that defense must dominate. I think we as a national policy need to decide that defense wins. That no longer can we accept insecurity for offense purposes. That as these computers become more critical, defense is more important. Now, gone are the days when you can attack their stuff and defend our stuff. Everyone uses the same stuff. We all use TCP/IP and Cisco routers and Microsoft Word and PDF files. And it's just one world, one network, one answer. Either we secure our stuff, thereby, incidentally, securing the bad guys' stuff, or we keep our stuff vulnerable in order to attack the bad guys, thereby, incidentally, rendering us vulnerable. And that's our choice. And it means a whole bunch of things: to disclose and fix vulnerabilities, to design for security, not for surveillance, encrypt as much as possible, to really separate security from spying, make law enforcement smarter so they can actually solve crimes even though there's security, and create better norms. One other principle is that we need to build for resilience. We need to start designing systems assuming they will fail. And how do we contain failures? How do we avoid catastrophes? How do we fail safe or fail secure? Where can we remove functionality or delete data? How do we have systems monitor other systems to try to provide some level of redundancy? And I think the missing piece here is government. That the market will not do this on its own. But I have a problem handing this to government, because there really isn't an existing regulatory structure that could tackle this at a systemic level. That's because there's a mismatch between the way government works and the way tech works. The government operates in silos. The FAA regulates aircraft. The FDA regulates medical devices. The FTC regulates consumer goods. Someone else does cars. And each agency will have its own rules and own approach and own systems. And that's not the internet. Right? The internet is this freewheeling system of integrated objects and networks, and it grows horizontally, and it kicks down barriers, and it makes people able to do things they never could do before. And all of that rhetoric is true. Right now, this device logs my health information, communicates with my car, monitors my energy use, and makes phone calls. Right? That's probably 5 different regulatory agencies, and this is just getting started. Right? We're not sure how to do this. So in my book, I talk about a bunch of options, and what I have, and I think we're going to get eventually, is a new government agency that will have some jurisdiction over computers. This is a hard sell to a low government crowd, but there is a lot of precedent for this. In the last century, pretty much all major technologies led to the formation of new government agencies. Right? Cars did, planes did, radio did, nuclear power did. Because government needs to consolidate its expertise. So, and that's what happens first, and then there is need to regulate. I don't think markets solve this. Markets are short-term. Markets are profit-motivated. Markets don't take society into account. Markets can't solve collective action problems. So, of course, there are lots of problems with this. Right? Governments are terrible at being proactive. Regulatory capture is a real issue. I think there are differences between security and safety that matter here. Right? Safety against things like a hurricane and security against an adaptive, malicious, intelligent adversary are sort of very different things. And we live in a fast-moving technological environment, and it's hard to see how government can stay ahead of tech. Right? This is something that's changed in the past couple of decades. Right? Tech moves faster than policy. The devil's in the details, and I don't have them, but this is a conversation I think we need to have, because I believe that governments will get involved regardless, that the risks are too great and the stakes are too high. Right? Governments are already involved in physical systems. They already regulate cars and appliances and toys and power plants, right? And medical systems. So they already have this ability and need and desire to regulate those things as computers. But how do we give them the expertise to do it right? My guess is the courts are going to do some things relatively quickly because cases will appear, and that the regulatory agencies will follow. I think Congress comes last, but don't count them out. Right? Nothing motivates the U.S. government like fear. When you think back to the terrorist attacks of September 11th, we had a very small government administration create a massive bureaucracy kind of out of thin air. And that was all fear motivated. And when something happens, there will be a push that something must be done. And we are past the choice of government involvement versus no government involvement. Our choice now is smart government involvement versus stupid government involvement. And the more we can talk about this now, the more we could make sure it's smart. My guess is any good regulation will incent private industry. That I think the reason we have such bad security is not technological, it's more economic. There's lots of good tech, and while some of these problems are hard, they're like send a man to the moon hard. They're not faster than light travel hard. And once the incentives are in place, industry will figure out how to do it right. A good example might be credit cards. In the early days of credit cards, we were all liable for fraud and losses. That changed in 1978, the Fair Credit Reporting Act. That's what mandated the maximum liability for credit card fraud for the consumer is $50. And you understand what that means. That means I could take my card, fling it in the middle of this room, give you all lessons on forging my signature, and my maximum liability is $50. Right? It might be worth it for the fun. But what that meant, right, that changed, that even if the consumer is at fault, the credit card company is liable, that led to all sorts of security measures. That led to online verification of credit and card validity. That led to anti-forgery measures like the holograms and the microprinting. That led to mailing the card and the activation information separately, requiring you to call from a known phone number. And actually, most importantly, that enabled the back-end expert systems that troll the transaction database looking for fraudulent spending patterns. None of that would have happened if the consumers were liable, because the consumers had no ability to implement any of that. You want the entity that can fix the problem to be responsible for the problem. That is just smart policy. So I see a lot of innovation that's not happening because the incentives are mismatched. So I think Europe is moving in this direction. Right? The EU is right now the regulatory superpower on the planet, and they are not afraid to use their power. We've seen that in the GDPR in the privacy space. I think they're going to turn to security next. I mean, they're already working on what responsible disclosure means. There's that. You ever see on manufactured goods, there's that label called CE? That's an EU label. Basically means meets all applicable standards. They're working on standards for cybersecurity. And you still see them get incorporated into trade agreements, into GATT. And there's an interesting rising tide effect. I mean, it's not necessarily obvious. The car you buy in the United States is not the car you buy in Mexico. Right? Environmental laws are different, and the cars are tuned to the different laws. But not true in the computer space. Right? The Facebook you get is pretty much the same everywhere. And if you can imagine there's some security regulation on a toy, the manufacturer meets it, they're not going to have a separate build for the United States. They're going to sell it everywhere because it's easier. And I mean, there'll be times when that's not true. I think Facebook would like to be able to differentiate between someone who is subject to GDPR and someone who is not, because there's more revenue to be gained through the greater surveillance. But when you get to things, I think it's more likely that it'll be a rising tide and we all benefit. United States, look to the states more, specifically New York, Massachusetts, California, which are more aggressive in this space. But I think this is coming. And I want to close with, I guess, a call. What we need to do is to get involved in policy. Technologists need to get involved in policy. As internet security becomes everything security, internet security technology becomes more important to overall security policy. And all of the security policy debates will have strong technological components. We will never get the policy right if the policymakers get the tech wrong, right? It will all look like the Facebook hearings, which were embarrassing. And you see it even in some, you see it in the going dark debate, you see it in the equities debate, you see it in voting machine debates, in driverless car security debates, that we need technologists in the room during policy discussions. Right? We have to fix this. We need technologists on congressional staffs, at NGOs, doing investigative journalism, in the government agencies, in the White House. Right? We need to make this happen. And right now, you just don't have that ecosystem. So you can think about public interest law. 1970s, there was no such thing as public interest law. There actually wasn't. It was created primarily by the Ford Foundation, oddly enough, that funded law clinics, funded internships in different NGOs. And now, you want to make partner at a major law firm, you are expected to do public interest work. Now, today at Harvard Law School, 20% of the graduating class doesn't go into corporations or law firms, they go into public interest law. And the university has soul-searching seminars because that percentage is so low. Percentage of computer science graduates is probably zero. Right? We need to fix that. And that's more than just, every Googler needs to do an internship, because there aren't spaces for those people. So we got to fix the supply, got to fix the demand, an ecosystem to link the two. And this is, of course, bigger than security. I think pretty much all the major societal problems of this century have a strong tech component. Right? Climate change, future of work, farm policy. And we need to be in the room, or bad policy happens to us. So that's my talk. There's, of course, a lot more in the book that I didn't say, and I'm happy to take questions.
Hi. Do you imagine that some of the socio-political things that we're seeing crop up fit within this framework, or do you think that that might be an entirely separate problem that needs an entirely separate set of solutions?
I think it's related. I mean, the problems I'm talking about are pretty purely technical. The problems of internet as a propaganda vehicle are, I think, much more systemic and societal. I do blame surveillance capitalism for a bunch of it, right? The business model that prioritizes engagement rather than quality has learned that if you're pissed off, you stay on Facebook more. So I think there are pieces that fit in. So some related, some different.
You seem to be talking a lot about policy that the United States and to some extent the EU can do, but I wonder, what do you think will happen as policy everywhere? Policy is local, the internet's global.
Right.
How's that going to play out?
So I think that never goes away. And some of it's going to be the rising tide I talked about, that especially when, less about privacy, but when you get to safety, I think it's more likely that we benefit from a European regulation that ensures that the smart vacuum cleaner you bought can't be taken over by somebody and then attack you and trip you. Right? We're likely to benefit from that more than, look, you can't have a microphone on the thing. We have to assume that there will be malicious things in whatever system we have. And so if we have a US-only regulation, it'll clean up a lot of the problem, because Walmart won't be able to sell the bad stuff, but you can still buy it in mail order from Alibaba.com. Right? So there will be some stuff in the network that is malicious. Much lower percentage, easier problem. We're still going to have to deal with that. And I don't think it ever goes away, because we're not going to have world government. There will be a jurisdiction, or there will be homebrew stuff that doesn't meet whatever regs we have. That'll always happen.
You talk about the need for intelligent technologists to get involved with making policy, but there are only so many hours in a day, and probably most of us would be taking a huge pay cut to go work in government and lend our expertise there. So how can we fix the incentives there?
So some of it is desire. I mean, I know ACLU attorneys that are making a third of what they would make at a big law firm, and they get more resumes than they have positions. Right? So it works in law. The desire to actually make the world better turns out to be a prime motivator. So I think once we have the ecosystem, we will get the supply. I think that enough of us will say, we've had great careers, we're going to take a break, or we're going to do something before we go work at a startup or a big company. Or maybe there will be a use for sabbaticals, like you see in law firms, or your bits of pro bono work, like a 20% project. So, yes, people will be making less money. I don't think that is going to harm the system. I think we just need to get the system working.
The most jarring thing I saw you write as a Googler was that data is a toxic asset. What can you say about this to this audience?
So the promise of big data has been save it all, figure out what to do with it later. Right? And that's been driven by the marginal cost of saving it has dropped to zero. It is basically cheaper now to save it all than to figure out what to save. Right? Disk storage is free. Processing is free. Transport is free. But it turns out that data is a toxic asset. That for most companies, having it is an enormous liability, because someone's going to hack it. It's going to get stolen. You're going to lose it. And I think we need to start talking about data not as this sort of magic goodness, but it decays in value, and that there are dangers in storing it. Right? The best way to secure your data is to delete it. And you're going to delete it if you know you don't need it. Right? So I've seen lots of studies on data and shopping preferences. And it turns out some pieces of data are very valuable, and a lot of it just isn't very valuable. So is it worth the extra 0.25% of accuracy to have this data that is potentially dangerous and will get you fined or embarrassed, and your stock takes a hit if it gets stolen? So I think we need to make more of those decisions, that the data is radioactive, it's toxic. Right? We keep it if we need to, but if we don't, we get rid of it, and we figure out how to get rid of it safely and securely. Right? I mean, take, I don't know, Waze. Right? Waze is a surveillance-based system, very personal data, but probably only valuable for like 10 minutes. Or at least, can be sampled. I mean, lots of ways I can treat that data, understanding it's a toxic asset, get my value at much less risk to my organization. And that's what I mean by that.
It's interesting that there are ways to anonymize stuff, but there seems to be no demand and no supply.
So there are.
It's marginally more expensive to do federated machine learning than do everything in the center, but companies don't care, and consumers decidedly don't care.
Consumers don't care. That's why, I mean, you need these decisions made not by consumers, but by citizens. Right? Consumers don't care. Right? Consumers are buying the Big Mac at 10% off. Consumers truly don't care. At the point of purchase, nobody cares. At the point of reflection, people care a lot. And that's why you don't want the market doing this. You want us as our best selves doing this. So, and about anonymity, it is harder than you think. Most of our ways of anonymizing data fails. It is a very hard problem. We don't. The anonymity research is really, I mean, actually the breaking anonymity research is very good these days, and outstripping the anonymity research. Go to the next.
One of the things that I'm thinking about is a lot of times when you see like a big vulnerability, so say there's a big operating system vulnerability, it's actually a genuine mistake of, it's not that someone put it in there on purpose, it's they missed something. So how does regulation solve that problem of, sure, you could have some great regulation in place that something's supposed to be done a certain way, but, oh, the implementation was slightly off or slightly broken. How do you fix that, genuine mistake, even if they were trying to do what the regulation specified as this would be a secure system?
So you'd be surprised, but money motivates companies. If companies will be fined a lot of money if their employees make a mistake, they figure out ways for their employees to make fewer mistakes.
But doesn't that only take effect after the mistake has already been, like the evil has already been done, essentially, once the
initially,
mistake is
but there's a
found?
deterrence effect.
Okay.
I mean, so yes, I mean, like arresting someone for murder only takes effect after he's done murder, but the goal is that the threat of being arrested for murder will keep you from murdering someone tomorrow, right? And so we want this deterrence effect. How to reduce software mistakes? We actually know a lot of techniques that pretty much all software manufacturers never do because it would be slightly more expensive.
Yeah.
But if it's a lot more expensive not to do them, suddenly the math changes. And I need the math to change. I need security to be cheaper than insecurity. Right now, the market rewards, let's just take the chance. Right? Let's hope for the best.
Okay.
And remember, no industry, did I say this already? Remind me, yes, no? No. Okay, no industry in the past 100 or something years has improved security and safety without being forced to. Cars, planes, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, food production, restaurants, consumer goods, workplace, most recently financial products. The market rewards doing a bad job, hoping for the best. And I think it's too risky to allow that anymore.
Hi. So you mentioned that you were embarrassed by the Zuckerberg hearings, and
I was embarrassed by the questions at the Zuckerberg hearings.
So okay.
Let's be fair.
Well,
the congressman embarrassed me.
So So I assumed correctly. I assumed you were embarrassed by the senators.
Yes. Yes.
Whereas I have the opposite problem. I was embarrassed by Zuckerberg. To
be fair, there's a lot of embarrassment to go around.
Yes, it's true. No, but
we can both be right.
I understand. Yeah, but I have a serious point here, though, is that while the senators don't know about tech, I think tech doesn't know about law, ethics, political science, philosophy. Like, do you think Mark Zuckerberg can even teach an introductory college course on free speech? Like, has he even read like what anyone has ever said about it? So like, shouldn't we all be learning about the world?
Yes.
rather-
So
yes.
this has to go in both directions.
Yes.
Right. I want techies and policy positions. I want policy people in tech companies. So
Yeah.
yes, I think we need both. We
Yeah.
need both sides talking to each other.
Right.
And so I agree with you 100%.
Good. Okay.
I mean, so right now I teach internet security at the Harvard Kennedy School at a public policy institution. So I'm trying to go, push people in that direction. At the same time, there are people at Harvard, the computer science department, trying to teach policy issues to go in the other direction.
I think you probably know a lot of stuff. So.
I know, but I'm not in charge.
You mentioned like sort of shock events as things that drive government policy, and I thought the example of 9/11 was like instructive, maybe in a way you did or did not intend, in that like the government response to 9/11 was to launch 2 illegal wars and create a surveillance state that violates our civil liberties on a day-to-day
No.
basis. So
I did intend
I'm not
to
sure that's
evoke
a
that.
good like. I guess I'm curious how you.
It's terrible, right?
So how do you see the reaction to the mounting threats in technology as being different? What's going to prevent the same sort of thing from happening?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
And that's my fear, that something bad will happen. Congress will say something must be done. This is something. Therefore, we must do it. Right? So my goal of having this conversation now, before this happens, is that we will, as a community, figure out what should be done when we have the luxury of time and insight and patience. And because I agree with you that there is a disaster, we will get a disaster as a response. And it will be just as bad. So let's get ahead of it this time. Right? Let's do better.
How do you envision preventing everything degenerating to the lowest common denominator? Like you said, client side, you can't really restrict people from doing what they want. Even if we say, okay, any company that wants to make money in the US has to follow these provisions, I'm just going to encrypt my data and send it to Alibaba Translate. It's a third the price of Google Translate, but they steal all my data. Like, how do we prevent this? Is there anything we can do?
Some of it, the answer is going to be no, some of it's going to be yes. So if you think about other consumer goods, we do make it hard for consumers to modify something. It's actually hard to modify your car to violate emissions control. I mean, you can do it, but it's hard. And then we try to have spot checks. You can imagine some sort of regime. You can imagine some system that tries to maintain security anyway, because there will be just a minority doing that. I think once we start hitting the problem for real, we'll come up with tech solutions. Right? Ways for the system to watch itself, other systems to watch each other. Can we do this non-invasively? I think we have to figure it out. Right. So I don't have the answers here, but these are certainly the problems.
I really liked your phrasing of the problem of we need to give up on offense so we can go all in on defense. And I think it's pretty clear to me where a lot of the offensive focus is in terms of law enforcement. But I think one thing that sort of remains mostly an unknown is on the military side, and how there's a ton of investment in military offensive stuff. And we kind of know, a little bit more maybe about like what Russia and China are using offensively against us.
We're not seeing the good stuff yet.
Oh, I hope not. Or anyway,
yeah. Right, we're not sure what we hope, right?
Yeah. But do we have a sense of what the military, the U.S. military, let's say, would be giving up to give up this offensive idea, and I don't know how willing they would be to go that direction.
They wouldn't be willing, but it's not their job to be willing. It's why you don't want the NSA in charge of your privacy policy, because it's not their job. Right? We need people above the military, the NSA, to make these trade-offs, because they are security versus security trade-offs. Right? Is the security we get from being able to spy on and hack the bad guys greater or less than the security we get from the bad guys being unable to spy on and hack us? Right? That's, right? So, I mean, security versus surveillance is the wrong way to describe it. It's security versus security. So someone above the military needs to decide that. It can't be the military. Because the military is not in charge of overall policy. They're in charge of the military part. And what we know about the capabilities is very little. I mean, we get some shadows of it here or there. And it seems to be, on the one hand, cruder than we'd like it to be. On the other hand, Stuxnet was pretty impressive. In general, the stuff you see is sort of the minimum tech it has to be to succeed. Right? There's sort of this myth of these super powerful cyber attacks. They're basically, one iota more than just barely necessary to succeed. You don't need to do more if you can take out the DNC with a, pretty sloppy phishing campaign. Right? I mean, why bother using your good stuff? So there's a lot we just don't know.
At risk of revisiting an earlier question, I was interested in what you thought about, so like one of the things that's often you see cynical in the finance industry is that they think that people in finance can outmaneuver all the people who are regulating them, in part because they're lesser paid. So I was wondering if you could revisit that, because I think law has maybe the exception because it's a little bit more directly related to human rights and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly I worry about regulatory capture, regulations being evaded. I think that all of those are real risks. I mean, this is not a great answer I have. It's just the best one I have. Because I don't see any way to put a backstop against sort of this massive corporate power other than government power. Now, in a sense, I kind of want either power. But tech naturally concentrates power, at least as it's configured today. So that's my missing piece. I think you're right that is a serious problem and worry, and something we just have to deal with. Policy is iterative. As techies, it's hard to accept that. We like to get the answer right and then implement it, whereas policy gets the answer like slightly less wrong every few months. But that's the way it works. I mean, the real question is, can we do this at tech speed? And that really is, I think, is an open question. So with that, I'm going to end. Thank you all. Thanks for filling the room. Thanks for coming.